Welcome back to part 3 of our Collaboration Skills Quick Start Guide. Hi, I'm Peter.
And I'm Sibylla.
And today we're talking about decision making. If we look around the world today, it's pretty obvious that the people we entrusted to make decisions on our behalf aren't doing that great a job. At least the world is a bit of a mess.
I think it's more than a bit of a mess. Actually, it's quite a mess we are facing at.
We need a new democracy. What would a new democracy look like?
Well, for me it looks like I have to take responsibility for myself instead of giving responsibility to all those politicians.
We are to bring about change in the world, and we understand that small groups have a power to do that. Then what would a governance system look like? For me, that it would be human scale. That is to say, each person feels like they have a voice, that a small group is a scale that we're biologically adapted to. A representative democracy where I have one vote once every 4 years is not really a human scale in a true sense. We look at a system that would have leadership spread out so that we all become leaders, that we don't just say, okay, there are experts, they know better, and I will leave them to it.
If we get really connected to ourselves, we are the experts for our life and we know best what to do. If we are connected to our heart, we stop destroying the earth because we know we belong to the earth belongs to us, we are really connected to the earth, and all these energies are totally intertwined.
And lastly, a new system that we contemplate would have to incorporate the idea of learning, transformation and change, which we talked about in part 2. There is a Native American Indian saying that in a circle we are all equal. In a circle there is no one in front of us and no one behind us, and no one above and no one below. We like circles in community development because in a sense we can see each other. We are face to face, we are present, we are vulnerable, we are accountable. We each have a part of the truth, no matter how well trained or what our background or experience is in a community. We all carry some part of the truth.
We all have possibility to connect things in a new and in a totally creative way.
Which stands in contrast to our current ideology where we are ruled by the fastest, the smartest, the quickest, most astute, ruthless, whatever. This is an actual Earth Song meeting. We typically have something like 20 to 40, perhaps upwards of 50 people in a circle. There are other ways to make decisions other than a full circle consensus. However, it's a very good training wheel to start here when we come from a background of more hierarchical systems. We don't necessarily have the training experience yet, and the co-housing model of consensus decision making is a very good place to learn these skills. In that sense, it's like going on a 4 or 5 day tramp in the mountains. In the first couple of days it can be a case of suffering while we get fit, and then after that, with experience and practice, we start to enjoy and really find the rest of the trip easier. It's like that with decision making in groups. It takes practice. In that sense, you can't really learn these skills in a book. It's really just practice.
Right.
At Earth Song, we took several weekends in retreat to go deeper, to spend some time working with gathering a large amount of input in a very interactive manner. We were here working with blocks, models of houses, and getting sort of feedback from the architect, giving the architect our ideas about what we wanted. It's quite important to design this kind of meeting workshop format. It really shows the value of small group work. You can see sort of a dozen or more people around this model, and that's something that you can do really well in small groups. Small groups are very effective at creating ideas and choices and options and proposals.
Small groups should not be bigger than around 12 people. Otherwise you have too much diversity and too many different ideas.
So we start to look at alternatives to hierarchies. We have this obvious continuum. We have at the far left concepts of, obviously, the boss kind of makes the decision, is kind of off the edge of the screen, and then we go to a simple majority, which is used very commonly in more traditional non-profit groups and in business world. Simple majority is where you have 50% or more is what's required to make a decision. It is fast, it is familiar, and it prevents a small vocal minority from having undue influence.
But if I would be one of the 49% minority that opposes this decision, I would not support that decision. Well, sometimes I'm forced to support it, especially in the business world. You get the salary and you have to do it. But I would do it with a minimum effort, not full-hearted, and maybe subconsciously even oppose it.
Indeed. Yeah, the 49% are always going to be disaffected, and I guess we know the idea of factions from the left and the right in politics. This happens. The 51% don't really need to listen to the 49.
If that happens several times to me, then there would be this disengagement from the whole project, even if I would say yes to the project.
On the other spectrum, we have a situation where everybody is required to agree to make a decision, unanimous decision. This would very strongly protect minorities. It's very common in some community groups or in native traditions to just talk kind of all night, maybe, until a decision is just finally arrived at. This you can do, and it does work. However, we're all busy and we have things to do. Consensus was evolved in the peace movement as a way of finding some middle ground here. So with consensus, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone agrees. It means that no one objects. The difference is a bit subtle, but it's really about preference. If we have, for instance, a decision about the colour of the bike shed, then someone might just not like red, but the majority do, and the person that really doesn't like red says, okay, the rest of you are happy with it, I will stand aside and not block.
This decision doesn't harm our vision. Doesn't matter whether this is red or blue or green, this bike shed. I do not really have a reason to block this decision.
Consensus needs training both for facilitators and for group members to do it well. Supermajority is quite often used for a fallback vote. It's kind of a more inclusive version of a simple majority. So if we have 75% majority, then we know that we have a much bigger confidence that it represents the feeling of the group. It's a compromise is the best way you could describe it.
Very seldom, but sometimes we do need this fallback vote, because there might be decisions that have to be made very quickly just because of the circumstances, maybe decision about money, about banking, but it gives you the chance to make a decision in a reasonable time.
Before we talk more about consensus, why do we want to do it? Firstly, it distributes power. If we make a leader in every chair, then every person has a voice, every person has a say. It harnesses the collective wisdom from every person. We often had situations at Song where many people who are qualified in architecture and design and building and whatnot pondered a matter, and then someone who didn't necessarily have that training could see a creative pathway at a point where we were struggling to find a decision. That diversity is important. Consensus, as Sibylla said, leads to better implementation. If everyone agrees when they make the proposal, it's more likely to actually be implemented with good heart. And lastly, the Quakers taught us this, that we can use our decision-making process as a community building process, as an environment where we celebrate our connection and our collaboration and our learning together.
And I think if you get used to making consensus decisions, you start trust the group decisions, because you don't block the consensus, and you know that having the chance to block a consensus gives you this trust. Yes, nobody is going to decide upon me with something I don't want to have.
So one of the first things we need to consider is, when we talk about inclusion, is that we make space for everyone to speak.
That's the task of facilitator. It's very useful to have a trained facilitator. Maybe some of your group has these skills already, or it's good if you send them to a training, because the quality of the facilitator helps a lot to the quality of consensus.
Having a system to manage speakers is the next thing that's really important.
The facilitator manages this system.
Yes, if we have more than 5 people in a circle, it will not go smoothly if we just talk as we do in a conversation, when people talk when they feel like talking. Coloured cards is used quite traditionally in the co-housing world, and it's quite a good system. It means that everyone, even the quietest introverts, can just put their card up and wait patiently, like everyone else.
So colored cards are used in 2 ways. One way is to structure this dialogue round, and the second thing is use the colored cards to vote. To get more information how to use the color cards in practice, go on the Earthsong homepage. It's earthsong.org.nz.
In addition to colour cards, your facilitation team can introduce different meeting participation formats, things like rounds, talking sticks. Breaking up into pairs and groups of 3 or 4 sometimes can be very effective as a change. And continuums.
Continuum is a means to find out in a very quick way where the tendency of the decision will go.
So you can get up off your feet and have people at one end of the room versus the other end of the room, or somewhere in between, to represent their feeling about a matter.
This was just naming some meeting tools. In our collaboration skills course, for instance, we are using them more, and you get the chance to practice them.
How do we handle a red card objection? If we do some preparation for this, we know that it will happen. How do we handle it sensitively? Red card's important because it might mean that we've missed something.
It's important that there is a means to block a decision. And at the same time, the blocker has to know that it could change a lot. And therefore, the blocker has to take it very seriously and not just hand this card up when he thinks, oh, that's a stupid color, I don't like that, I can never say yes to that color. This blocking has always to be connected to the vision of the project. What we decide now is against our vision. That is the reason why I think it's against our vision. And to make the hurdle a little bit bigger for the blocker, in some communities the blocker has to go into the subgroups as well and to deal with the new proposal that the subgroup is going to come up with.
There is a risk in young communities where the veto becomes kind of abused and it becomes a tyranny of the minority. This is something that we have to plan for. In general, a red card means really we haven't thought through the proposal well enough, and the first recourse is to send it back to the subgroup for some more work. If we do that after a second meeting and the decision still fails, then we might go to our fallback vote if time is required.
Just a few words to a subgroup. The legwork is done by a subgroup usually. For instance, if you want to start an entity, they found out the legal structure of the entity, they are looking for an accountant, they are going to consult lawyers, they have the information, and then they say, we think this is the best thing for our project because of this.
So it's like painting. Consensus preparation is everything. We talked about good facilitation, trained facilitation, training of members in consensus decision making, having subgroups to do the legwork, and that we have our agendas, our minutes, that in such a way that people can come to the meeting prepared, that we've had time to think about issues, to talk to people, to maybe phone the subgroup to ask questions.
And it's important that all members of the full circle read the minutes of the sub-circles, that they are really prepared and that they can think it over. Oh, I have this question, I have another question, then another question. These questions I'm writing down, and then I know what I'm going to do in the full circle.
Traps for new groups with consensus. The first one is obviously if you've been in any kind of meeting, you'll know that a few people tend to do most of the talking. If you want to make peace with the introverts and the extroverts in your group, you must have a system that manages speakers. And the reason for this is that the best talker does not always have the best ideas.
And the facilitator should prepare the meeting, and then he knows which meeting tools he is going to use.
The other one is a collection of problems related to groupthink. Groupthink is where a few people say, yeah, we know what we're doing, let's do it, and everyone says, okay, well, I don't know, but they sound like they know what they're doing. When we have a leader in every chair, each person is called to step up and make a considered decision. We often found at Earthsong that we tend to lean on people who we know have more training or experience or authority in a matter. And again, that's something that we just have to watch.
We all have a brain, and getting the input, the details, the facts, what we can choose of is one part. And the second part, very often the subconscious starts to work, and then suddenly one has a totally new creative idea.
That's a very brief view over decision making. We go into a lot more detail in our collaboration skills course, and if you're interested, you can get in touch with us. Until next time.
So see you.
Bye.
Bye.